Hi everyone. Before we get started today, I'd like to let you know that this presentation has a trigger warning attached to it. Some parts of my talk include discussion of ableism. It appears all throughout my talk and does start quite early on, so if you need to step out or put me on mute, please do so. All right. I spent the first 30 years of my life feeling like I had been dropped off on an alien planet. Like I was just sitting around waiting for someone to come and pick me up. I always felt so other. I didn't fit in anywhere, and everything I thought, said and did always seemed to be so out of step with everyone else. I thought there was something wrong with me. So I would work hard and try to fix things and try to learn how to be like other people. I read articles, books, I'd watch videos, I'd go to emotional intelligence training at work, and I'd fail every exercise and always save the wrong people from the volcano. None of these things helped me. All it did was make an even bigger mess, because it didn't make me happy and I wasn't being myself. One day I kind of reached this point where I thought, well, maybe being different's actually not so bad. Maybe it's a good thing. And then once that happened, once I came to accept myself for my differences, I needed to know why they were there. Nearly 5 years ago, in early 2016, I was diagnosed as autistic. Technically, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder level whatever, but I don't consider myself to be disordered, and I don't really like functioning labels either. We'll talk about those a bit later on. Despite the fact that I went looking for answers and sought out a diagnosis, that news turned my world upside down. I didn't really understand or feel comfortable with myself until around 2 years after my diagnosis. I had a lot of internalized ableism and years of what we call masking to deconstruct. Masking happens when autistic people try to pretend to be or try to pass for someone who is not autistic. It's exhausting, damaging to our well-being, and usually done for the comfort of neurotypical people. Neurotypical refers to people who aren't neurodivergent in any way. And being neurodivergent means you have a different brain. So when I say a different brain, I'm talking about things like autism, but also ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, bipolar, traumatic brain injury, and many, many more things. I think different brains are beautiful and a really wonderful thing. And I don't have to wear a mask around other neurodivergent people, because even if they're not autistic, because they just kind of get it. I'm not sure if it's that shared understanding thing, or if we're just more inclusive by nature. I don't know. So after my diagnosis, I started writing about my experiences. Sharing my story really helped me process all those years of not knowing. One day I came across something called identity first language, and it was so validating. I'm an autistic person, not a person with autism. It's not an imaginary friend. I don't keep it in my purse. With also implies there's a scenario where I can be without it, and that's not how it works. It's my brain. It's present in everything I think and feel and do, and I really like it. It's a big part of what makes me, me, and I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's amazing. As someone who was diagnosed as an adult, I learned pretty quickly that there aren't a lot of support options out there for autistic adults. It's mostly for children. I also learned that autism is not very well understood in society, and that lack of understanding can have serious and lasting impacts on autistic adults. The most disabling thing by far about being autistic is living in a world that largely doesn't understand or accept me as I am. The social model of disability very much applies to my experience as an autistic person. We don't yet live in a world where autism is simply viewed as a different brain, a different way of experiencing the world, and therefore needs different things. I'm not broken. I just experience the world in a different way. That realisation made me feel a combination of 4 things. I felt delighted, relieved, frustrated, and I'll be honest with you, I felt angry. I wanted to change things. So I kept writing more and more, and I started giving talks about, what it's like to be autistic as a user researcher. I started writing articles and giving talks on how to conduct user research with autistic adults. I wanted to normalise the idea that we are users too, and that our lives are just as full and complex and big as anyone else's. We're just moving through the world in a different way. 6 months ago, after years of writing and talking about UX for autism, I finally got the chance to do the thing that I had been writing and talking about. And I learned a lot. When I was writing and giving those talks, my own unconscious bias made me think that because I was autistic and a user researcher, that I was perfectly positioned to educate and advise others. It didn't occur to me that never actually having done the thing that I was talking about, never having actually conducted user research with autistic adults before, was quite the gap. In some ways, I became part of a much larger problem. I'm not proud of that, but I'm here today to change that. My name is Ashlea McKay, and I'm a user researcher in the UX team here at Synergy in Canberra. 6 months ago, we started a project with Untapped to develop a website for an Autism at Work pilot program. The users for this project belong to 3 groups. We had autistic adults, whom we called autistic job seekers. So these were people who had recently been looking for a job or were currently looking for a job. We also spoke with employers and Disability Employment Service staff, or DES staff for short. I was really excited that we got this project because it allowed me to do something for other autistic adults, to change things in some small way. It gave me an avenue to do what I've been trying to do for a while. The unemployment and underemployment of autistic adults is, quite frankly, absolutely disgraceful. In Australia, the unemployment rate for autistic people is 31.6%. That number is more than 3 times the rate of disabled people in general, and more than 4.5 times the overall unemployment rate. The current number may be a lot higher. That is a pre-pandemic number from 2018. I can't imagine how many of us were caught up in what's happened this year. And there are also a lot of autistic people who, like me, were diagnosed later in life and are wandering around without actually knowing. And there are those of us who choose not to disclose because we don't have to. So it can be hard to get stats, but The overall state of employment for autistic people is pretty sad. I'll tell you a story from my own life. My first post-diagnosis job hunt lasted nearly 3 years in UX. In an industry where we pride ourselves on being caring and inclusive, I was deemed by many to be too much of a risk. My job hunt reached a point where I seriously considered walking away from a decade-long career in UX and starting over in another industry. I was going to be a hairdresser. Pre-diagnosis, I never had a problem getting an interview, but the moment I publicly acknowledged my autism and started living openly, everything changed. I had no idea how much things had changed for me until I started looking for a job. My story is not unusual in the autistic community. If anything, I got off lightly. I know autistic professionals who searched for 5 years until they found an inclusive employer. My 3-year job hunt ended in July 2019 when I found Synergy Group. Synergy is an accessible workplace to me as an autistic person. It's a place where I am unconditionally supported to just be myself, and I get to bring my whole self to work. That is unusual in the autistic community. Permanent employment at skill level and the ability to bring your whole self to work, that is rare for us. So when this project came along, I was very aware of how close I am to it. I was very aware that I have walked in these shoes before, but I had to be very careful and strict in my acknowledgement that while I've done that and while I have a lot in common with these users, I am not the user of this website. I had to keep those roles very clear. I was on another project at the time, so I was initially assigned to this one in an advisory capacity. So me thinking I was being really helpful, I came up with a list of things that I thought the team working on the project would need to know about conducting user research with autistic adults. I felt quite protective of these users. I wanted to make sure that the space and experience that we created for them was as comfortable and supportive as possible. I didn't want us to impact upon them in any way at all. The content of that list that I shared with the team largely came from the talks and articles that I had given and written. I felt really good when I hit send that day, until I didn't. I started to question the advice that I had given. There is so much diversity in the autism spectrum. What if this list that I had put together was just a list of things that I needed, or a list of things that a group of people close to me need? What if it wasn't even remotely comprehensive or helpful or useful? I wondered if I was potentially biasing other people in ways that might negatively impact upon autistic people. I finally started to wonder if I was part of the problem. This is where I took my first sip of that champagne. As the project progressed, an opportunity came up for me to be involved in the user interviews with the autistic job seekers directly. The website content was written and reviewed by autistic people. The biggest group of user research participants by number were our autistic job seekers. We were working with Untapped, an inherently autism-friendly organisation, and now there was an autistic user researcher on the project. This is amazing. I have Never seen anything like this, and I was so excited to be a part of it. This wasn't another one of those times where someone designed something for us without even bothering to include us in the process or understand us. We were there every step of the way in this project, and it was incredible. Nothing about us without us. Representation absolutely matters. Our team decided to run interview sessions that were part interview, part usability testing. The website was a simple WordPress site that we had prototyped directly into. So our biggest thing that we were testing was the content and also the structure and how well that aligned to the user journey. That was what we were really focusing on. All of our sessions were run remotely via Microsoft Teams, mostly because we needed to reach people all around the country, but due to the pandemic, we also ran the Canberra sessions through Microsoft Teams. I learned so much through this research, and I'm going to spend the rest of my talk talking you through the lessons that I learned. But before I do that, there's a few things I want to flag up front. The key theme that you will see running through these lessons is diversity. There is an enormous amount, breadth and depth of diversity in the autistic community. No two of us are exactly alike. I have been saying that and writing that for years, but I never truly appreciated just how accurate that statement is until I saw it up close. It's something that you really do have to see for yourself, and you will, because there are so many of us out there. You will be seeing us. You will be researching with us. Autistic people, we have a lot of common ground, but a lot of differences too. It really is a spectrum. I also, on that note, want to be very clear that the notion that everyone is on the spectrum is offensive and untrue. You either are or you aren't. And as I alluded to earlier, I don't like functioning labels very much. I'm talking about labels like severely autistic, suffers from autism, or the creepiest one I've heard so far, touched by autism. No. I can assure you autism does not go around touching people. I find these terms misleading and marginalising. If an autistic person's differences present as mild, they may have trouble getting their support needs taken seriously. And if an autistic person's differences present as severe, that human being may have trouble being taken seriously, full stop. The autistic community doesn't use functioning labels, and neither should you. Outside of medical context, there's absolutely no reason for you to classify us or try to put us in groups to relate to or understand us. And for those of us who are autistic, there are far more interesting facets to the diversity that exists within our community. And that gets even more complex when you add in intersectionality. So look at that instead. I'm also going to be giving you some examples from my own life today. Now, that might seem counterintuitive given that the title of this talk is Drinking Your Own Champagne, but I can only speak for myself. I don't speak on behalf of the entire autistic community, so I can only tell you this one viewpoint. So please remember that. Right. The first lesson that I learned during this user research was about assumptions. As a human being, I certainly do make assumptions, but being autistic, I make significantly less assumptions than my non-autistic peers. I ask a lot of questions. I'm not afraid to be seen as difficult or annoying. If something is unclear, I will say something. When communicating, I need complete context, clarity, and precision. I learned through this project that this is also true for a lot of other autistic adults, but to varying degrees. Some of the people we met through this user research needed more information than me, and some needed less. So the lesson I'd like to impart upon you here is that it is best to just, when researching with autistic people, it is best to provide detailed, clear, complete instructions about how the research will run up front. You have to explain everything clearly and precisely. We're not less intelligent. We just make less assumptions than you might. For example, if you're running the research through a video conferencing tool like we did with Microsoft Teams, you need to tell your participants everything they need to know up front. So you need to say the way to access the session is through the link in the invite. You need to tell them whether or not they need to install anything, or if you're happy for them to run it in the browser. If you want them to use a specific browser, you need to tell them. If you want them to use a specific device, you need to tell them. You also need to let them know if screen sharing will be used, if they need to dial in from a quiet place, or if you expect them to use their camera during the session. Don't patronise us. Just ensure that your instructions are complete and leave absolutely no room for doubt, because that's what we're scanning for when we're reading these things. Also, about assumptions, if during the session something looks wrong in the design, we will tell you. Autistic people won't necessarily assume that the error exists because it's a prototype or a draft, or because you're still working on it. Even if you give us that caveat up front about, oh, hey, it's a prototype and not everything will work, we won't necessarily assume that that overarching statement applies to this one instance we found. We won't assume that you already know about this thing that we've just discovered. So don't say things like, oh, as I said earlier, or, you know, I told you it's a prototype. That's just noise to us, and it won't stop us from saying those things. It won't change our responses. So instead, bite your tongue and say thank you. You've been given a gift. Take it or leave it. The next lesson I learned was around comfort levels and how they can vary based on the individual. Talking to strangers in general is challenging for me as an autistic person. Video calls with strangers, even worse. It's not that I don't want to meet new people or I'm afraid of them or anything like that. It's more that I don't know what to expect and I don't know what they will expect from me. So I'm just trying to process that ambiguity. I think that's what it's really about. It's something that I have in common with other autistic people I know, but not all. During this research, I noticed varied levels of comfort around the use of the camera. I noticed that some participants started out the session kind of with the camera off or sort of angled away from it, and then as the session progressed, either turned it on or started engaging directly with it. It seemed to happen shortly after I disclosed my own autism to the participants, potentially indicating their comfort levels had increased. Some participants left their cameras off for the entire session, and that may have had absolutely nothing to do with comfort levels whatsoever. And that's totally fine. The key lesson that I learned here was that it served as a reminder that comfort levels can vary based on individuals, and that you just have to be prepared to support whatever they need. I think that's the main thing here. The next lesson I'd like to share with you is around when and how to go off script with autistic participants. As user researchers, we like to structure our research sessions around a script. We don't always do it. It kind of depends on what we're doing, but sometimes we will use a script. During this research, there were times when strictly adhering to the script, just for the sake of consistency, wouldn't have been productive either for the project or the participant experience. and that crafting a new one on the fly was the best thing for both the participant and the project. Autistic people in general think differently, and within our community, there is an even greater diversity of thought. To get the insights we needed to evolve the design, each session needed to be tailored to the individual thinking style of that participant. We started with a basic script, but we had no idea where the session would take us until it started. There were some sessions where participants just immediately went off exploring on their own, and rather than pulling them back to the script, we just let them drive. We let them decide where the session was going to go, and we followed along, asking questions along the way, as we would do anyway as user researchers. We also had participants who wanted to have a really deep, detailed verbal conversation. They wanted to share their stories. They wanted to dive into the content. They wanted to really talk about what they were seeing on the page, and we let them do that. We also had participants who didn't want to talk that much, so we gave them tasks, and we let them drive exactly where those tasks would go, and then the tasks that they led to, which was great too. We also had a few participants who were very detail-oriented from a technical perspective. Now, it's a myth that we are all like that. So we let them test the website the way they would normally test a website, and they unearthed some much deeper technical issues that we had no idea existed. There were 3 pages where, if viewed on an iPad Pro, the letters would bunch up, and it looked like we didn't know what proofreading was. So it was great that this person had found this, and now we can fix it. It was awesome. Our participants thought and communicated in a diverse number of ways, but the insight patterns were clear and consistent from day one. Participants were all telling the same story, just telling it in different ways. It was great. The next lesson I learned was about supporting sensory differences. The air conditioning system that's in the building that I'm sitting in right now is so present in my day that I should give it a name. The lights too, I can hear them. Autistic people have sensory differences that are always present. We don't leave them at home. They do come to work with us. And the main sensory difference that I noticed in this research involved the use of headphones. We had at least 3 participants need to stop the session halfway through because there was an unignorable buzzing sound. We couldn't hear it, but it was hurting people, and it was making it impossible for them to focus on the session. We realised pretty quickly that it was their headphones. This made it really tricky because we couldn't hear it, we couldn't stop it, but we certainly couldn't continue the session because it was really, really hurting these people, and sensory differences need to be taken seriously. The main thing here, I think, is to be patient and be guided by what the participant wants and needs. If they separate themselves from the thing that is causing the sensory overload, so in this case, take off the headphones, let them. Be patient, let that silence hang while they process, and don't push for a quick resolution, because talking to us and adding to that noise is not helpful. It's going to make it a lot harder for us to try and quieten things down if you're just making more noise. So yeah, patience, I think, is the big thing there. Another lesson I learned through this user research was around triggering questions. Autistic people are generally no strangers to trauma. We see more in a few short years than you might see in an entire lifetime. You need to be mindful of potential triggers when running user research. I accidentally asked a triggering question of a research participant during this project. Theory of mind refers to being able to understand the desires, intentions, and beliefs of other people. It's not an empathy thing, it's more like being able to get inside someone else's head kind of thing. I personally struggle with it sometimes. Theory of mind comes up in user research through usability testing scenarios. Now, we might ask someone to pretend they are named Joe and they want to do X, Y, Z, so where would they go? We're trying to relate it to the real world, but this approach can be challenging for autistic people. So in trying to reduce the theory of mind elements in this study, I thought it might be helpful to ask participants about their personal circumstances and then tailor the scenario-based tasks in each session to suit the individual. So if they were currently looking for a job, we would say, thinking about your current job hunt and where would you go to learn how to write a cover letter? La la la. Anyway, the problem was this created room for triggering questions. One of those questions was, do you currently have a job? I'm not going to tell you exactly what one of my participants said, but the response they gave me was no, followed by what amounted to them telling me that they believed they may be unemployable. If you ever accidentally ask an autistic user research participant a triggering question, there is only one thing you can say, and this is what I said to that person. You say, thank you for sharing that information with me. It might sound cold, but anything else would be dismissive, ableist, and or offensive. Don't try to reassure us in that neurotypical, oh, I'm sure that's not true kind of way. Instead, acknowledge that someone has given you this very personal piece of themselves and you're going to respect it and you're going to look after it. And unless they ask you directly, they're not looking for your opinion. After that session, I removed that question from our base script, and for the remaining sessions, since I had already disclosed my own autism, I made jokes about how the scenarios had been written for us to pretend to be someone else. It worked really well. Which brings us to our final lesson, which is autistic humour is awesome. Use it. Just like everyone else, autistic humour can vary from person to person. I don't always understand neurotypical sarcasm, but I think autistic people do it really, really well. It is much drier and much more elaborate, and it just comes back for more when you least expect it. I really enjoyed running these research sessions because the participants were absolutely cracking me up. So when you research with autistic people, because like I said earlier, you will be doing that, I would strongly encourage you to use humour, and when your participant uses it on you, run with it. Just follow it wherever it leads. So that's what happened when I finally did the thing that I have been writing and talking about for years. I am so grateful for the experience, and I am delighted to have been given the opportunity to sit down here with you today and tell you this story, start to make things right. This story shows that conducting user research with autistic adults is something that you really need to see and do for yourself. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen as often as it should. I gave a talk on this 2 years ago, and I still get emails each week from people who have decided to wander into the design for autism space but have done absolutely no user research whatsoever. They come to me with these like fully formed ideas or nearly finished products and say, oh, well, you're autistic and you're a UX person, so what do you think? Yeah. My lived experience as an autistic person is valuable, but I am just one person. And being a person means that I am as prone to bias as the next person. I thought that just being autistic and being a user researcher was enough for me to guide non-autistic people in researching and designing for us. It's not. We need to ensure that multiple and diverse autistic people always have a direct voice in the things that are designed for us. That diversity is the most important part. Don't just come to me, don't just read articles, don't just watch this talk. Put the work in. Talk to as many of us as you can. Have direct conversations with us. Sit down with us. We're not that hard to find. There's still a lot of stigma, myths, and misconceptions around autism and what it means to be autistic. I still see neurotypicals who tiptoe around it or really struggle to know what to say and do. The tragedy narrative is very much alive and well, and so is ableism. We're not scary, we're not difficult, we're not fragile, and we are most certainly not broken. There is no single way to be a person. We can teach you a lot if you engage directly with us. There is a lot to be gained from our unique and diverse perspectives. We experience the world through our own individual kaleidoscopic lenses. You will never even begin to understand them until you see all the colours, the way it moves, hear the way it clicks into place, and so much more until you see it for yourself. So go drink some of your own champagne. Thank you.